What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome just in general. In this video, I'm going to be going over how to make the Emily Tote. This is the easiest level. This is just like the Slouchy version, the Slouchy tote bag version, as a crossbody only with a magnetic closure. We messed up the magnetic closure in the video. Don't even worry. Everybody messes up. It's not a big deal. But we made it work. We also added just a regular old slip pocket. We didn't use any zippers. I wanted to make this as easy as possible for you guys who've never made a bag, or if you wanted to make a bag and just do something really easy and somewhat quick. But this is a great little bag to use when you're going grocery shopping. I don't know. It's just a great bag. It's a good size. It's a great seller. It shows. I have sold tons of this bag. And then this is just another way to make it. I did use my Juki TL2000QI to make this bag. It's a nice domestic machine from Juki that's very similar to most other bags. We first show how to install a walking foot on your machine. So if you've never heard of this, this is a great tool to have. I also showed how to make a recessed zipper panel that could be added to your bag instead of adding this magnetic closure. And that zipper panel would just be sewn into this seam right here. And then you'd have this nice zipper closure on your bag that is honestly nice and easy. So, you know, you've got options, guys. It's a great little bag. And I really hope you enjoy. If you did, please feel free to give this video a thumbs up. Leave a comment below if you plan on making this bag, and yeah, let's get started. Alright, so the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to switch from a regular sewing machine foot to my walking foot. Different machines will have walking feet that look a little different, but what it does is you can see these little black feet here. What that does is that's going to walk our fabrics along together kind of like this, so that there's no odd bunching, nothing is sticking to the foot of the machine, and you're only going to need this if you're going to be working with a vinyl. So most of them have a little arm up here, and this goes over the screw where you screw in your needle. So for this machine, this is the Juki TL2000QI. I'm going to remove this side screw completely, and I'm going to attach it to my machine, but you want to make sure that that lever is attached to or around the little screw mechanism for the needle. And then we're just going to put this back in and get it as tight as possible without it being unreasonably tight, you know what I mean? Like, it's not a tire. We don't want it to be impossible to take off later. So that is as easy as it is to install a walking foot. And now we're ready to sew with vinyl. So as I explained in the intro to this bag, we are not going to be using any zippers. I will be showing you how to make the recessed zipper panel for this bag, but we won't be installing it into this bag because I really want it to be something easy. For the very first bag maker, I just want it to be really simple for you guys. So what I'm going to start off with is I have 4 bobbins made. I feel like that should be enough. I'm going to throw everything on the ground because that's what I'm good at. I threw it on the ground. Okay. So we're going to start off with the crossbody strap. Because we've got a fresh bobbin, we're not going to run out of thread, and this is the best time to do it. So all you'll need for that are 2 snap hooks and 1 slide adjuster. You can make your strap as wide or as thin as you want. You just want to multiply how wide you want your strap by 4. So I want a 1-inch wide strap, so my strap is going to be cut to 4 inches wide because we're going to fold it in and then fold it in half again. So I sell this 1-inch hardware on my website. It's very amazing quality. A lot of people love it. Toot toot, my own horn. Okay, so If you're going to make yours out of vinyl, I would suggest cutting it out of the width of your vinyl. Most vinyl is like 54 to 56 inches wide, but there are ends, the selvage I should say, of the vinyl strap. You'll want to cut that off. We don't want it, nobody wants to see it, just cut it off and throw it somewhere else. So I made a mark on my strap for 2 inches. So 2 inches on this side, 2 inches on this side, because we're gonna fold that into the center like that. So you can see like that. If you are familiar with double-sided tape, I would go ahead and use, this is 1/2 inch double-sided tape from waywack.com. It's like $8 a roll, and then they have pretty good shipping costs. And we would place this down the center. Again, I'm going to make this for the most basic sewer, so I'm not going to be using double-sided tape, as much as it hurts my heart. But I will be using these clips to keep everything in place. These are Wonder clips. They sell a bootleg version on Amazon. You can get 100 for like $6, and they're amazing. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna clip the sides in at first, and then I'll fold it in half, and then I'll clip everything together again. So we're just folding it all into that center line. You might be thinking, well, couldn't I just make this out of cotton? Absolutely you can, and then you'd be able to iron it. Just follow the instructions on the pattern for a crossbody strap made with cotton or your exterior fabric, whatever that may be. I just thought it would look nicer to make it with vinyl, and I did not have enough fabric. So I'm just using like a really fun, fancy fat quarter. So just gonna continue folding everything into the center. If you're new to bag making and you've really never worked with vinyl, you might be thinking, well, can't I just iron it? No, absolutely not. I wouldn't recommend it. Don't do it. All right. Folding everything into the center. Okay. And then we're gonna fold this in half again, so that the only raw edges are on the top and the bottom. So as I'm folding it, I'm just gonna readjust my clips so that they're all close to each other. They're probably about 2 inches apart, you know. You want to make sure they're kind of all facing the same direction. You want to make sure the sides kind of lay on top of each other. They line up nicely. So using double-sided tape makes this take about 1/3 of the time. So just keep that in mind. However, some machines, they can't handle the stickiness of the double-sided tape, so that's up to you if you want to take that risk. They also sell something at Joann's called Dritz basting tape. It's a much smaller roll, so it's kind of expensive for how much you get, but I think that's pretty easy for most machines to handle. So we've got everything clipped together, and I'm just gonna start on the folded side. So I guess the open folded side. So here's my closed folded seam, and then this one's technically open if you think about it. So I'm going to use a stitch length of about 5. You want it to be longer. If you used something too small, you could kind of perforate your vinyl. It won't last as long. And then it just, for one, it takes forever, but then it also just kind of doesn't look as professional. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go pretty slow because you can't go super fast with a walking machine. We're going to backstitch just once or twice, and then we're just going to slowly go along the edge. And I just kind of hold it in between my fingers to help keep it straight. And then I'm kind of just unclipping it slowly. If you have to stop for this step, that's okay. Not a big deal. You might need to just leave your needle in and unclip. That's okay. And then I always like to just give it a glance as I'm going, make sure everything is stitching fine, it looks good. I'm happy we went with a stitch length of 5 for sure. The vinyl I'm using is pretty thin, and I got it from Joann's Fabrics, or Joann Fabrics, yeah. So we're getting close to the end, so I'm just going to leave my needle down and I'm just going to pivot to a 90-degree angle. I'm going to backstitch at those corners, and then we're going to get to the end and pivot one more time. Leave your needle or your foot down, kind of backstitch one more time. I always like to backstitch just to secure those just a little bit more. There have been times where I check in on a bag with a family member and I'm like, is everything going okay? And they're like, well, my stitches have come a little loose. So I always like to make sure I add some back stitches just to prevent that. If you're wanting to sell your bags but you're not quite ready, giving them as gifts is definitely the best way to kind of test out your skills and get some feedback on what you're selling, or what you will potentially sell, I should say. So I definitely used my friends as my guinea pigs for a while. I mean, I still do, to be honest. Alright, so we're reaching the end. I'm gonna add a few back stitches, leave your needle down, and then pivot. Back stitch, back stitch. And then this machine is pretty cool. It has an automatic thread cutter when I just press on the very front of my pedal. There we go. So I'm going to use my scissors and just kind of cut away at those extra threads. And then we are going to start with our slide adjuster. The very first time I made a crossbody strap, I remember reading the pattern and I was like, I don't even understand what is happening. So we've got our slide adjuster. The back of the bar is facing up, so you can see where it kind of curls over. There's kind of like a very flat side. So we're just gonna slide it in here, and then we can still see the back side of our bar, and we're going to slide it back around the bar. So in between the vinyl layers, there'll be this sliding bar. So we're just gonna pull that through. And because vinyl doesn't fray and we don't want it to get way too bulky for our machine, we're just gonna leave the raw end out, and we're gonna add 2 to 3 lines of stitching just for added strength. So I'm gonna set this down. I'm gonna switch my stitch length down to about a 4, and I'm just gonna start with my needle down. Add a little back stitch, go nice and slow. You don't want to go too fast or your machine could skip stitches. It could break a needle trying to go through all that thickness, so just go nice and slow. I'm going to cut my thread and I'm going to readjust and sew through it a second time. Make sure that you secure those stitches with a little back stitch. I've actually had a customer email me before and say that her slide adjuster, like, it just fell out, the stitches fell out, and it's because I was using a stitch length that was too long and I wasn't properly securing them. So make sure you secure it. Okay, so we'll cut those threads. All right. So we're almost done with our strap. We are going to, you can see here, this kind of slides around and now we cannot see the bar. We're gonna grab the wrong side, and I call it the wrong side because we can see this little lip here. We're gonna keep that face up, make sure it doesn't get twisted or anything, and then we're gonna grab a snap hook. With the snap hook in our hand and the open part up, we're gonna slide that through the, we're gonna call it the wrong side of the slide adjuster. So I'm just gonna slide this through down pretty far so I can make sure that nothing is twisted and my snap hook is still facing down. We're gonna loop that over so that now I can see the right side of my strap, and I'm gonna slide that through the top like this. You might need to kind of adjust your slide bar. We're gonna slide it through like that. And just again, make sure nothing is twisted. There should be this big loop. This should be able to slide freely. And now we're going to hold this out, push all the way down on your slide adjuster there, and pull this through. Okay, so you should be able to see your lines of stitching, but you shouldn't be able to see where you folded over that vinyl unless you open it up, of course. But it should be this nice big oval of vinyl, and then we're going to keep this side facing up. So technically the right side is out, but we can see the wrong side of this strap. We're going to grab our other snap hook here. We're just going to slide that through and fold it over like that. So here's the top of our strap. You should be able to see the slide adjuster fully, and then just like that. So we're gonna fold this back over so we can see that back seam, and we're gonna very, very carefully stitch along the bottom. Make sure you go nice and slow so no stitches get skipped. And because this walking foot is so bulky, I'm going to kind of flip it around this way, and I'm gonna back stitch really slowly. We're gonna back stitch. It's kind of like backing out of a crowded room. You're just like, I'm just gonna go this way. So you wanna go slow. And then we can turn it around and go straight. Again, make sure you add those little back stitches, secure those stitch lines. So we're going to stop in the corner, and we're going to turn at a diagonal, so it's like you're facing your enemy. You can see corner to corner at a diagonal, and we're just going to sew to meet that corner. Nice and slow. If your machine isn't quite strong enough to get through this, I would definitely recommend a cotton vinyl strap. And then if your needle is having trouble getting through those layers, you definitely need a thicker needle. So I would recommend maybe a 12 or a 14, maybe even a 16 gauge needle. So be sure to keep an eye on that, make sure everything is stitching well. And then that is what the crossbody strap looks like from the top side, we'll call it. And I mean, that's pretty much it. You did it. You did great. Go ahead and take a second, give yourself a pat on the back, grab a beverage, whatever kind of beverage you may need, because we're gonna start the rest of the bag now. So I'm gonna start by showing you guys how to make the recessed zipper panel. If you are not using any zippers at all in your bag, please skip this step. Please just skip to the next couple of minutes. But I wanted to get this out of the way so I could show you guys how to do it. So you should have 2 pieces of fabric that are the exterior and 2 pieces that are the lining fabric. I'm using waterproof canvas to line my bag, as I stated in the intro, which gives me a little more stability without having to use as much interfacing. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fold the edges of all of these over by 1/2 inch to the wrong side. So fold it over by 1/2 inch, and I'm gonna use a little clip. If you need to, you can use double-sided tape, or you could even iron it in place. Unless you're using vinyl for your exterior fabric, then no, don't do that. Whatever you do, don't do that. Okay, so there's what that looks like folded over. Just keep folding. And then I'm going to do the same exact thing with the lining. If you decided you wanted to purchase waterproof canvas and you're watching this video and you're confused onto which side is which, the wrong side of the fabric is going to be pretty smooth, almost like plasticky, and then the right side of the fabric has like a woven feel to it. They call it the weft of the fabric, I believe, but it has a texture to it, and the wrong side is a little smoother, so that's where we'll fold over. Other side over. And if you're not sure how I'm kind of figuring out where 1/2 inch is, I have a little ruler on the side of my sewing machine here. Okay. Normally, I would honestly just use the double-sided basting tape or leather tape. That was 1/2 inch, and then I wouldn't need to really figure out where 1/2 inch was. So we'll add another clip. At this point, I'm gonna head over to my ironing board and I'm gonna iron my zipper flat. You might be thinking to yourself, why would you need to iron a zipper? But sometimes when they're shipped, they can be laid a certain way, they can get wonky and wrinkly. So you just want to carefully press it and add a little bit of steam with your iron and clean it up if you. So we're going to grab one of our exterior pieces and we're going to lay our zipper with the zipper pull facing down on one end. I'm going to add some more clips. These other small clips that I'm using I get them from Sally Beauty, but you could really get them from any beauty supply store. They are 1 inch wide or 1 inch long alligator clips. The total length of them is 1.75 inches, but this part here is 1 inch. So these are a really great way to hold your fabric together without holding them together too strongly like the Wonder clips can. Okay, so that is clipped in place. We're going to have a nice long tail depending on what size zipper you use. I recommend an 18 inch, but you can use longer and then just cut it down. Not a big deal. We're going to fold the end of that zipper at an angle, about a 45-degree angle. So it was once like this, and we're folding the tape over like that. And then we're going to start by kind of just sliding our clip off, but holding it with our finger. Be careful not to hit yourself with the walking foot. And we're just going to baste the zipper in place at about 1/8 of an inch. And then before you reach the end of your exterior fabric, you're just going to give a little back stitch. you don't want to sew past that exterior fabric. So we're gonna clip it off, and you can see your zipper is now attached to the exterior fabric. But before we're done, we're gonna add our lining fabric. And the lining fabric is gonna go face down. So the wrong side is facing up, but the right sides are all facing together. So we're gonna line those up, and we're gonna clip them together. Make sure they line up nicely. If you get to the end and they're not, if one side is longer than the other, just kind of readjust the fold a little bit so that you don't see one fabric over the other. And we're gonna flip it over to the right side so that we can see, or I should say with the exterior side facing up, so that we can see our original stitch line. And kind of move that clip out of the way. We're gonna lay this down under our zipper, or under our foot, I'm sorry. And starting at the exterior fabric, we're just gonna move it in about 1/8 of an inch so that we're about 1/4 of an inch from the way, from the end, from the outside edge. I'm not so good with words, guys, you know. So here's my original stitch line, and then right in through here is where I'm gonna be stitching again. So we're just gonna come down the side. Again, if you decided not to use a zipper for this step, or for this bag, you will be skipping this step. But if you're watching it just to see if you can add a zipper, you can, trust me. It just takes time and patience and the will to do it. Because if you want to do something, you absolutely can. Like, you'll get there, I know it, I believe in you. All right, so that is what we're looking at. You can see there is my original stitch line and here is my new stitch line. So we're just gonna fold this open and iron it together. So you're gonna fold the lining down as well. So you should have, I'm gonna call it a zipper wing. So your zipper should have one wing, and we're gonna iron that flat. If you used vinyl for your zipper at any part, please be careful when ironing. Try not to hit the vinyl with the actual iron. Use a pressing cloth if you have to, and just a little bit of steam. I'm going to use the clips that are holding down the edges to clip them together. Like that, and then I'm going to clip down these sides too. Okay, so there is the wrong side. You can see I don't see any zipper teeth, and this is my lining fabric. That's a good sign. And then this is my exterior fabric, and I can see my zipper teeth and my zipper pull. Another good sign. So if you're seeing this, you did great. High five. And we're gonna start by top stitching. Actually, we're gonna start at this top corner. Back stitch. And then be careful, your layers could be a little thick with all that interfacing. So we're gonna stop at the corner, kind of pivot down, and we're gonna top stitch this entire square. Back stitch, we're getting close to the edge, and pivot, back stitch again, go forward and stop. And then this is totally up to you if you want to top stitch this part, but I always like to because it's going to keep those layers together and keep it from shifting, and it's only going to take a couple extra seconds to do. Excess threads. And so that's what one side of your zipper wing will look like. There it is from the wrong side. I missed a little bit here. Not a big deal, it's gonna get caught into the seam allowance, but if you want to, you can sew down this side just to make sure you've caught it. So let's just do that really quick so that Nobody has to worry. There we go. So now it's all together, and we can see here where it's a little bit smaller. Not a big deal. It happens when you fold things over. So now we're going to repeat all of those steps again, but we're going to be adding the second zipper wing. So if your fabric is kind of directional, just kind of figure out where you want this to go. I like the look of this because the leaves kind of line up and it's like a blossoming flower. I don't know, I'm a loser. So we're going to start by lining up the bottom edge, so not where the zipper pull is. We're going to line this up and we're going to clip it in place. I'm just going to clip it from the wrong side. I know I'm kind of doing the opposite steps, but I just wanted to make sure it all lined up. And then I'm going to flip it over. And then I'm going to fold over, or fold under, I should say, my zipper. Just to kind of line it up. So that's what that looks like. And then we're going to stitch down the edge. Stitch down the edge. Base that in place. If you need to sew this from the other side, please do. If you're like, wait, I don't know where my fabric ends or starts, then flip it over, seriously. There's that. So now that's all basted in place. Then we're going to add our lining fabric. So right sides together. So you can see here lining side to lining side, exterior side to exterior side. I'm just going to lay those down. Start by lining up one side and clipping, and then everything else should kind of fall into place. And this is something that you can use to add to really any bag that has a seam. You can kind of bisect it, add it in. But that, I mean, that can come later too. Okay, so it's all clipped together. Everything lines up pretty nicely. And then we're gonna come in from that stitch line, from that existing stitch line, just like we did last time. If you're having trouble stitching that close to your zipper with the walking foot on, take a few minutes and switch it out to the existing one, but I've kind of gotten used to it, so I'll just keep going. Again, back stitch, so we'll cut all of our excess threads off of there. And then we'll open it up like so, and clip all of our right sides together, or wrong sides together, I should say. And then I'll use an iron to press this open. If for some reason your exterior side juts out a lot more than your lining side, just go ahead and cut off the excess. Luckily for this recessed zipper panel, it doesn't have to be precise. You can make this thinner if you really needed to. You could make it wider if you really needed to adapt it for any bag, really. Okay, so we're gonna start at a corner, back stitch, and bring it around town. Flip that. You're going to stitch about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. Make sure you're catching through that zipper tape, just as another line of defense. If your zipper is in the way, just kind of unzip it and rotate, pivot, backstitch, backstitch, and turn. And then we'll clip and trim off all of our excess. I'm going to turn this over. And I did catch that lining side. I missed a little here, not a big deal. If you wanted to, you could trim off that excess exterior fabric, but I'm gonna leave it on because we're not actually using this one for this bag. We're gonna use it on a different one. Now, you can cut your zipper tail down to 18 inches, or 18 and a half inches, I should say, I'm sorry. 18 and a half inches. I'm gonna cut off the excess. If you wanted to, you could add a little scrap of vinyl. We can cut a little square of this fabric to add to it, but I sell these little zipper ends, so that's what I'm gonna be attaching. I need my little screwdriver. Hold on one second. Not at my usual machine. So actually, let me tell you what you would do if you decided you don't want to use this hardware. You can grab just a little square of vinyl and fold it over the tail. You want to make sure it's the same width and everything, and just kind of sew around that edge. And if you wanted to make it really fancy, you can use an extra little snap tab piece that I've provided in the pattern, and it has like a cute curve to it like that. Okay, but I'm going to use this fancy little zipper end that has a screw, so be careful you don't lose it. I always like to keep a magnet around, but I'm at a different machine. I'll make do. So here is my cut zipper end. I'm going to use a lighter very carefully on that edge to make sure it doesn't fray. And we're just going to fold it under and then fold it on top of itself. Make it nice and thin. You can use a little bit of glue here if you want. We're just going to slide that all the way in. You kind of want to keep sliding until you feel you can't slide it anymore. Yep, that feels good. And then we're going to screw that zipper back in. Or screw the screw back in, sorry. Back into the zipper. Alright, so that's it. Now you've added a little zipper tail. You can unzip it, but that tail catches it, zip it back up. And the wings have been added to your zipper. So we'll use this on a different tutorial, but we're not going to use it in this bag because you can't really use the zipper closure and the snap closure, but that's okay. So I'm going to set that aside. We are going to work on the lining of our bag first. I always like to get that out of the way. Sometimes it gets tiring, if I'm being honest. When you're near the end of your bag and you're like, I just want to get the lining done. So here's my lining face up, and then here is my lining top piece, and the bottom of my lining has these big squares cut out. So we're going to line up the top edges, clip it in place, like so, and then using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, we're going to sew across the top. And then I'm going to fold the piece up and I'm going to be sewing through that top seam. Actually, yeah, no, this is the way we're doing it. However, I'm sorry. If you wanted to add if you were like, no, I'm using my zipper panel, you would lay this face up on the right side of your lining panel, and then you would lay the lining top panel and stitch down, and then it would be inside that panel, and then you would repeat that step on the opposite side. But like I said, we're not adding that. So we're gonna fold this up and top stitch through the top panel, the top lining panel. And you should be sewing through this seam here. Okay, so I'm gonna just show you really quick what I mean. So this would be facing up. You would center this on your lining, so just kind of fold it in half, make a crease, lining sides facing together. You'll clip it into place, and then you'll lay this face down over top. So all the way around, and then once it's stitched on, you'll top stitch that open. And then you'll repeat that with the other side, and you'll have a recessed zipper panel that fits really nicely inside your bag. Okay, and I'm just gonna repeat the steps like I did on the other side. That up. Sorry, I was looking for my little ruler for this next step. So we have our top lining panels all attached to our lining fabrics, and now we're going to work on adding one of our slip pockets. You can customize the inside of this bag to be literally whatever you want. If you keep reading in the pattern directions, it does kind of show and go into how you can customize it a little further. But right now we're just going to add a slip pocket. Again, this version I'm showing you requires no zippers. I know a lot of people who just start sewing are like, no zippers please. Not a problem, I hear you, they can be complicated. So we're gonna mark a 7-inch square, 7-inch by ½ inch square along our pocket panel. So what I've done is I've folded both my lining piece and my pocket panel in half and lined up those center marks. How many inches? About 4. Oh, about 4 inches from the top. So 4 inches down. So now I'm gonna take another inch and I'm gonna start my my opening cutout. So I'm using a 7-inch, I'm using a 6-inch by 1-inch ruler. I'm lining it up at the top of that panel, and 3½ inches from one side, I'm gonna make a mark, and then I'm gonna move over to the other side, and then 3½ inches from that side, I'm gonna make a mark. So altogether, it'll equal 7 inches. So then ½ inch down, I'm going to continue those same parallel marks. Okay. And just make sure they line up nicely, unlike what I just did. So 3.5 inches on either side, you've got a 7-inch opening. So to keep that in place, it can be a little complicated. I'm going to be using my hands, but if you have pins, you know, you can just kind of, here, we'll use a pin. You can just kind of pin it in place with 2 pins. Okay. So now, starting at the end of one of those lines, I'm just going to backstitch a few times and then sew forward. Backstitch, backstitch. And cut my fabric, and then we're going to sew parallel along the other line as well. So now you should have 2 parallel stitch lines that are roughly the same size, and we can unclip. And then we are going to cut it open. And I'm just going to kind of make these marks here so you can see how we're doing it. Oh, that's perfectly straight. So these ballpoint pen marks that I've just made are how we're going to cut it. You're going to cut down the center, and then out at about 1/2 inches, you're going to make a V shape. So altogether, it's like a very long double-ended Y. So to start it, I'm going to fold my fabric in half and make a little clip into the center. And then from either end of that, you can cut up, reach that Y shape, and then you're going to cut right next to your stitch lines. You're not going to cut through them though. Just right next to it. So right next to it, not through it. Cut those extra threads off if you want. And now what we're going to do is we're going to flip this so that the wrong sides are together and the right sides are facing out. So here it's going to look from the wrong side of the fabric. We're going to pull that square all the way through. And then we're going to iron it. So here's what it looks like from the inside. Here's what it looks like from the wrong side. So I'm just going to iron it really quickly from the there's what that looks like. And now if you wanted to add a zipper, if you had a zipper laying around, you can grab one. I'll just show you what it would look like really quick. You're going to grab one, you're going to pin it in place. You can use some basting tape if you want, but you're just going to lay your zipper over top of that, or underneath it I should say, and sew it in place. And then make sure you pull in your zipper pull so that you can actually use your zipper. But again, this is going to be a zipper-free bag, so we're just going to sew around the opening, because you really don't have to, you don't have to put a zipper in it. Some people are like, no, I won't use it. Make sure that all of your fabric is laying flat. You don't want to be sewing through any extra layers. Put my foot down. If you have a little cup for your clips, it's nice to leave that where you'll actually put them. Reach the top, backstitch, backstitch. So now we're going to grab the other half of our zipper pocket and lay it right sides together. So we flipped flipped it around, we can no longer see the actual lining. We can only see the wrong side of the lining. I'm going to clip it together. We'll go ahead and clip it in 3 places just so we're keeping it very secure. And what we're going to do is we're going to sew in a U shape, and we're going to leave the bottom open. So flipping it back over, I'm going to fold my lining in on itself so that I can see that zipper panel, or the pocket panel, and we're going to sew around. And then once we get close to the top, I'm going to again fold my lining in on itself, and then I'm going to turn, I'm going to pivot my foot. And we're getting close to the end of that top part. And again, we're just going to fold the lining in on itself so that we can see that lining pocket. And then back stitch at the bottom. And then you can go ahead, if you have any excess, you can just kind of trim it up. Just like that. And throw it on the floor. Who cares? So now you have a little slip pocket inside your bag. So you can slide your hand through, and it's gonna have an opening, but that's okay. We're gonna use that later on. So if you want to, you can just kind of fold this over and iron it down. And this will just help us later on. So there's what the lining looks like. And then you can repeat those steps on the other side of the bag if you want, or you can find one of my other videos on how to add more pockets to your bag. I just wanted to make this tutorial simple, well, as simple as it can be for a beginner bag maker. So we're gonna lay all of these pieces right sides together, lining sides out. Line up those panels using my clips. And we're just gonna sew along one side and then sew along the other. We're gonna leave the bottom completely unsewn. So 1/2 inch seam allowance, we're gonna start at the top and back stitch. You can now switch your stitch length down to about a 3.5, just so it's nice and secure. Use about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I've cut my thread and I'm gonna flip it over. Again, we're not touching the bottom half, any of those squares just yet. Okay, so now our lining is mostly put together. So if you want to, you can take a little break. This would be a good place to stop, especially if you've got other things to do. Again, your lining is going to be left completely open, and there it is from that side. And then you should have this open as well. So I just realized we forgot to sew on the snap tab portion of our lining fabric. So that's fine. That's not a big deal. So what we're gonna do, it might even make things easier for us. So let's call it a happy accident. We're gonna put our side seams together and we're gonna make center creases. So they're lined up nicely. God, I can't believe I forgot to do those. Okay, so we're going to measure 3 inches from the top, and we're going to line up our snap tab at the bottom of that 3 inches. So technically it'll be about 1.5 inches from the top of the snap tab and 3 inches from the bottom. And we're just going to kind of center it over that line. And then we're going to sew around the opening. This is absolutely optional. You do not need to add this to put your snap onto, but I think it kind of adds a little pizzazz. We're just going to sew around that really slowly.
Sorry, I forgot that step, you guys. If you're following the instructions, then you know that I forgot it and you sewed it when you should have. But yeah, anyway. So for this part, what I'm actually gonna do is I'm just gonna like lay these pieces on top of each other and line them up and then hold it in place as I sew it on again. Yay. Such an idiot. So now we kind of have an idea of where our snaps are going to be placed. We've got a little extra padding, if you will, for where they're going to go. And then we can grab our snap. And this is an 18mm snap, and it has these prongs and these 2 washers. So we want to keep that all together. And what we're going to do is centered over the center mark on the back side. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. We're going to line up the center circle with the center of our bag and mark those 2 parallel lines. And then what I'm going to do is, you can use a pair of scissors and gently cut into it, but I'm going to use a little seam ripper. And we're going to seam rip that piece. So just really carefully. And then from the other side, poke your snap through. And then place the washer on the back. And then you can fold your snaps in or out. I don't think there's really a right or wrong way to do it. Sometimes I do it either way. So now what you're going to do to make sure they line up nicely, you're just going to kind of lay your washer over your other snap piece and just make sure they fit together beautifully. Mark out those lines. Remove the washer and repeat that step where you stab through the fabric. Turn this right side out. And then it should clip together immediately, and then we can add our last washer, and then we're seriously done with the lining this time. I can't believe I did that. But hey, if you're making a really simple tote and you don't want a magnetic closure or a zipper closure, then that is an option to just leave off. But there's what that looks like. So it just adds a little something extra to the lining, a little more stability to our snap tabs. And now we can move on to the exterior of the bag. I'm so sorry I forgot that. Oh, goodness. All right. So for this more simple hobo style bag, what we're gonna do is we have our top exterior main panel, and we're gonna lay our lining panel over top, right sides facing together. And we're just gonna clip it into place. And using about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Just sew down that
And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna flip this open and top stitch along the vinyl. You wanna make sure you're sewing through that seam as well. It just gives it an extra little 3D effect almost. We're just gonna adjust your stitch length to be a little bit longer, maybe a 4.5, maybe a 5. Just go nice and slow. Make sure to keep it straight. And I'm just kind of pulling these layers away from each other as I'm sewing. So there's that. That's your front panel. Now if you wanted to add the handle connectors, this is the time where you would add them. For this bag, we are only making it a crossbody bag, so we're not going to add any of the front handles. So I'm going to repeat that last step on the other side of the bag. Our bottom panel has these little notches that are at the bottom of the bag, so you want to make sure you're laying the straight sides together. And again, that 1/2 inch seam allowance. Very good at marking out your seam allowances. I always recommend using a ruler. You can always grab a ruler and just kind of sketch out that 1/2 inch seam allowance. Just kind of lay your ruler down and make a mark along the side. So we'll open this up. Again, you want your seam pointing down towards your vinyl, and you're going to top stitch on your vinyl. If this seems to be way too thick for your machine, you could kind of flip your seam the other way and top stitch on your canvas fabric, but I don't think that looks quite as good, but it's a different look. So you can see here, this kind of makes this a little 3D and kind of point up, or you can go the other way and then your vinyl is kind of pointing up. So it's personal preference. It's what you like the look of the most and what's easier for you. That. If you're going to add a nameplate to your bag, I do sell little nameplates that say handcrafted on my website. They're super cute. They come in all the same colors as the hardware, so you can coordinate. So we're just going to add a little nameplate to the front of the bag. So how I'm going to find my center is I'm just going to fold it in half, carefully make a little press mark, and I'm going to add it 2 inches below on the front of the bag. So I like to fold my prongs upward and lay your hardware down. Get a mark for the center, and then you can kind of line up and center your hardware some more. I believe that it's about 1/2 inch from the center, so 1 inch total marking. So I've just got like these 2 little dots. I'm going to use my seam ripper again, and I'm going to make 2 little incisions through those marks. Make sure it's pointing the right direction, and insert that. And then there's a little washer that comes with them as well, and you'll just fold it open. So now you'll have a little nameplate on your bag. Gives it a little extra something. For the bottom of the bag, for this one, we're not going to be adding any Peltex. I remember as a beginner, I had a terrible time fusing Peltex to my vinyl, and it was no good. So if you wanted to, you could give the bottom of your bag a little extra structure by adding the Peltex as the pattern instructs for a harder version. Or you could even add some SF101, some Decoville, just something to give it a little extra
stability, but I'm not going to be adding anything. I wanted this to be very simple for you guys, and it doesn't necessarily need it. It's just going to be kind of a floppier bag, which some people really like, so there's nothing wrong with it. So the way to line that up is you're just going to match up those notches. So you should have about 1/2 inch shorter on each side, and those pieces should line up nicely. And what we're going to do is we're going to start at that corner where that notch is taken out, and we're just going to stitch down 1/2 inch all the way until we meet up with this notch here and then backstitch. So that should kind of continue there. Does that make sense? And what we're going to do is we're going to fold this open, and we're going to top stitch along that seam, kind of like we did here for the accent panel. If your machine is having trouble sewing through those layers of vinyl, it is technically optional. It doesn't need to be done, but it kind of helps keep that seam in place. So, and it, you know, it just kind of looks nice. So there's that. And now we're going to repeat that step on the other panel. We're going to line up those bottom layers in between those notches. Use some clips to hold it in place. And 1/2 inch seam allowance, backstitch. Sorry, that's my air conditioning kicking on. And then we're going to fold that seam open and top stitch along the bottom panel. Okay. So now you should have this big square bottom tote that needs to be put together. So we're going to lay the right sides together. We're going to start by matching up our side panels. Put those together. Match up that side panel. Flip it all the way to the bottom. The top portion as well. A ruler. You can tell I don't normally sew at this machine, but I wanted to show that this bag can be made without a domestic sewing machine. You can use your regular sewing machine. I made this bag plenty of times on a regular sewing machine. So we'll start with a 1/2 inch seam allowance on the outside edge. I like to backstitch at my side panels and just follow all the way up, back stitch again, repeat with the other side. Be careful where your vinyl meets, it could get a little thick. Back stitch, and there is that. So now we want to add our crossbody strap connectors. Okay, so if you have double-sided tape and it works for you, this is where you'd want to add a little piece along the center and fold your ends in. We're not going to be using double-sided tape, and that is okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold the raw long edges in towards the center, and I'm going to clip it together like this. We're just going to lay our clips along the outside edge like that, and I'm going to sew on my sewing machine. I'm going to sew those down. Okay, we're just going to go from one side to the other. Okay, so here's what that looks like from the outside, and there's what it looks like on the other side. There's our raw edges. So we're going to repeat that step to the other side. Fold those raw long edges in towards the center and stitch along either side. So now we have these 1 inch by 4 inch pieces. We're gonna grab a triangle buckle. These are also available through my website. If you wanted to, you could use 1 inch D-rings as well, I should say, instead of. But I really like the look of these triangle buckles, so that's what we're gonna use. We're going to fold the top side down by 1 inch. So this top edge is under 1 inch, and then we're gonna just meet those raw ends in the middle. And we're going to add a clip on either side. So you can see it's a little bit longer on the top, a little shorter on the bottom, but when you flip it over, you can't even tell. So it just should be one flat piece. And we'll repeat that with the other side. So we're gonna fold this over by 1 inch. So it should be 1 inch, not including the hardware. So you should be able to line this up with your ruler. Your triangle buckle is past the 1 inch, and the bottom of your fabric hits that 0 mark. And then we're gonna fold that under as well, so that from the outside edge you see no raw edges, like that. Okay. So we're gonna open this side seam, and you can use your ruler to kind of press it down, or not your ruler, your iron. Your ruler. Hello, brain. Could you work? So you're using your iron to press that seam open. Nice and flat. So that's what that looks like from the inside, and that's what it looks like from the outside. So we're gonna lay it with our, the wrong side is going to be facing out, and we're gonna grab our ruler and one of our triangle buckle connectors, and 2 inches from the top of the bag is where we're going to line up the vinyl. So the triangle buckle does not count in that measurement. We're gonna line it up with the bottom, or the top of the vinyl, I should say. The bottom of the triangle buckle, the top of the vinyl. So 2 inches, here's my 2 inch mark, 1 inch, 2 inch, and then there's my vinyl. We're just gonna carefully hold that in place, and then sew over top. Sew that baby on. Go nice and slow so that you don't skip any stitches. We're gonna back stitch around the ends, and then like we did when we made our strap, our crossbody strap, we're just gonna I'm gonna call it backing out of a room because it's super thick. We're gonna remove our clips carefully, lower the foot, and back stitch. Nice and slow. Make sure your vinyl doesn't come up. And then we reach the end, and we're gonna turn sideways. We're gonna pivot along the bottom. We're gonna back stitch at the outside ends. Back stitch, back stitch. And then when we reach the side, we're gonna sew back up. So we're gonna sew right over top that existing stitch line. And then when we reach the top of our little square here, if you wanted to, you could call this done, and you could add maybe 2 rivets, along the outside edges if you have rivets. If not, what we're going to do is we're going to sew diagonally, again, just like we did on that crossbody strap. So we're going to go from this side to the other side, kind of at a diagonal. If you need to use your ruler to line it up or make a little mark, you can. I'm just going to kind of eyeball it, so I'm going to backstitch at the start, reach that corner, backstitch again. And if you wanted to, you could sew down the bottom and then reach that other top corner. Or you could even cut your thread and do that one more time. This is just going to add even more stability to your bag. It's going to make sure that that does not come undone, because when you sell a bag, or even if you're using this bag for yourself, you want it to hold a lot of weight. So we're going to trim all those extra threads, and there's what that looks like. So you can see we've got our box stitch there. This is what it looks like from the wrong side. So having this extra seam under there is going to add even more strength, more layers, more strength. So now you're ready. You can take a little break if you need to, but we're going to sew the other side as well. I'm going to iron this one more time. And when you're ironing, make sure you do not iron your zip or your vinyl. I know I said that already, but it's very important that you don't touch the iron to your vinyl. If your sides are a little uneven like this, don't worry, it's okay. You're new to sewing. I'm not new to sewing, and it happened to me, but it trims out of the way. It's really not that big of a deal. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna use the shortest side. So this side is a little taller, we're using the shortest side, and we're gonna just repeat those steps we just made. I'm going to lay my triangle buckle at the bottom of that 2 inches. I'm going to hold it in place as I move it towards my foot. I'm going to lay my foot down. You want to make sure you're not sewing through your hardware. And I'm just going to start by adding a few back stitches. You might think there's no way I can add too many back stitches, but trust me, you can. You don't want to perforate that vinyl. That would be bad. So we're going to back out of the room slowly. I'm going to add another back stitch just because I can. I'm going to move my clip some more. Okay, I've reached the end. So I'm going to lift my foot up, leave my needle down, and pivot. And back stitch. And back stitch. And come right back up. Lay your foot down. Nope, did I run out of bobbin? Oh, I ran out of bobbin. Huh, that was a very good place to run out of bobbin, I guess. I'm always happy if I run out of a bobbin while not top stitching, but this wasn't the worst time to run out. Could have been worse. So we'll pop our bobbin back in there. Thread through. Oh, I didn't catch it. Okay. And actually, if you can see where I ran out, it's not that bad. So I'm just going to start at that bottom, come all the way to the top. Back stitch, and we'll turn it, top stitch, and then we'll add that other diagonal stitch line after I trim all these nasty threads. Get out of here, thread, what are you doing? Stitch. Good job. Now we are ready to sew the bottom corners. Our hardware pieces have been added, and you'll see that these side corners are still left open. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of fold it at that bottom seam. So close it up. I'm going to add 3 clips. We're going to add one here. We're going to fold it. I'm going to add another here. And then I'm going to open this bottom seam and I'm going to add a clip here. So you can see here that I have 2 lines of stitching. One was from where we sewed those pieces together and one is from where we top stitched. And we want to start sewing 1/2 inch in, of course, and we're going to start sewing on those 2 lines. We're not going to start sewing up here, we're going to start on those 2 lines. So 1/2 inch in, I'm going to back stitch, back stitch, back stitch, and make sure you keep that seam folded open and back stitch over that as well. So when I hit that middle seam, I'm going to back stitch. And then we're getting close to the end, so when I hit those 2 lines of stitching, I'm going to add some back stitches. So here is what that looks like. Hopefully you can see it pretty well. There's my 2 lines of stitching, and there's where I started sewing. So now we can trim the excess in that seam. Like that. And I don't cut those because that could cause them to come undone. And we'll just throw that on the ground. So let's repeat those same steps with the other side. If you have any extra threads, feel free to trim them now. And we're just going to close it in on itself. So there's our flat bottom, and there's our side seam. Clip that open. Okay. Start from there and there. Stitch, back stitch. Keep that seam folded open. Back stitch, back stitch. Trim that excess. So again, I'm going to start cutting next to where I added the bottom panel. So it's kind of a strange shape, but it helps. Alright, so the outside of your bag is all finished. It's a nice slouchy bag, so it might stand up a little bit on its own because that vinyl helps, but this is about how slouchy it'll be. When we add our lining fabric, if you're using waterproof canvas, you'll see how much body it adds. It's incredible. Okay, so remember we left the bottom of this open. That is okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to flip this so that the right sides are facing out. So right side's facing out. Awesome job. Bottom is left wide open. That's okay. It's a little worrisome, but I promise it turns out okay. We're going to lay our lining inside, and we are going to match up those side seams. So put the tops of the bag together and line up those side seams. Open it up a little bit if you can, and clip it together. And then grab the other side seam and clip it together. And then what I do is I just kind of readjust it while holding it at those side seams, just like filling out those layers, making sure everything lines up okay. Because if your bag did not line up okay, let's say it's a little bunchy on the inside. So let's say this inside piece was like, it had a lot of places where it just seemed too big. What you'd want to do is go in and kind of adjust those seam allowances a little more so that they fit together nicely. If you use the right seam allowances, everything should you know, should line up pretty good. Pull it out again. So now we are going to sew these two sides together from the inside of the bag using about a 1/2 inch seam allowance, which means we are going to kind of closely follow the space between these two. So I might be up just a little ways from that lining seam. Backstitch over my side seams, kind of helps reinforce that. I'm trying to keep everything out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. Luckily this is a nice big bag, so top stitching isn't too hard. Small. Okay, and I'm back to where I started, so I'm just going to sew a little ways past and cut it off. Alright, so now comes the fun part of birthing the bag, but because we left the bottom piece wide open, this is not going to be a problem. It's going to be really easy. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab the lining out, and then we're going to grab the bottom of the bag through that and just push it all right side out. Ooh, she's pretty. So you can push out those bottom corners just slightly and you'll see that everything lines up pretty nicely. And you just want to make sure that you sewed through everything. Everything looks okay. Looks pretty good. So now what we're gonna do, this gets a little confusing, especially if we're reading it written, but when you see it, you're like, oh, okay, all right, I see. So remember how we left the bottom of this pocket open? What we're gonna do is we're gonna reach in through that pocket and we're gonna push the lining through it. So we're gonna pull that pocket right side out and we're gonna grab the bottom open part of our lining and pull it through. I know what you're thinking, this is crazy, but you're gonna be surprised when you see the end. When I first saw it explained, I was like, what? That's so silly. Like, I'm not doing that. But then I tried it and I was like, okay, it does make it a lot easier. So, this can't always work for a bag, but for beginners, it's a lot easier, especially if you've got hands that are a little arthritic or something. This kind of helps relieve some of that pressure. So what I'm doing right now is I am clipping the bottom two pieces together. The bottom of those two pieces. So if I keep pulling, you'll see, here's my corner. If I keep pulling on this side, you'll see again, here's my corner. This little L shape that's cut out. So all that I'm doing right now is I'm sewing straight down this bottom side using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. If you use a little bit wider, that is okay. That'll just mean your lining is less likely to be or feel saggy. We can switch to a little bit smaller of a stitch length, maybe like a 3.5. We're just gonna sew down the bottom of the bag. So now that that's all together, what we're gonna do is you're gonna grab at the corner of that L shape on either side. You're just gonna grab them and pull them apart. And then it'll bring those two sides together just like it did on the bottom. And we're gonna open up our side seam and clip it together just like we did on the bottom. And again, use that 1/2 inch seam allowance, maybe a little bit wider, so along the bottom. I like the back stitch where they back stitch at the end. Perfect. And then we're going to trim that extra seam allowance down. Okay, and then we're just going to repeat those steps on the other side. Grab those two L shapes, meet them, open up the side seam. And then clip on either side. You guys, we are almost done with this bag. You've done such an amazing job. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to push that all back through that opening, through that pocket. Push it all out. And just double check that everything is sewn together nicely. You didn't skip any stitches, you didn't miss a corner, anything like that. Looks good, so there's what the bottom looks like. It's kind of like a really oblong H or like an I, if you think of it that way. And then remember how we folded this under, so we should have a nice crease. We're just gonna fold that back in. Like kind of like the cuff of an arm or something, or a sleeve, not an arm. Arms don't have cuffs, they have hands. Well, not all, but some of them do. All right, and we're gonna sew that opening shut. This is the inside bottom of your pocket. If you have a little woven label that has your business name or something like that, you can even print those onto fabric. This is a really nice place to add it. It almost looks intentional then with this sewn seam. We're just going to sew along the bottom of that pocket. Back stitch at the ends. You don't want that coming undone. And then people be like, I lost something in that bag and I don't know where it is. Alright. Here we go. And then what we're going to do is we're going to shove this all into the exterior side of the bag. Everybody in. And then I just kind of use my pointer finger and my pinky finger to line up those corner seams, and then you can push your slit pocket back in. Pushing the corners of the slip pocket back in. If you decided to use a zipper instead of making it a slip pocket, you could zip that back up now. But now we are ready to top stitch the bag. So I'm going to switch my stitch length to a 4.5, maybe a 5. That's all personal preference. But you can see we've got this little top piece of the lining panel. That's going to stay inside the bag. So we're just going to roll this seam in our fingers to line it up. So you can see I'm just kind of rolling it along in between my fingers to straighten it out. If you wanted to, you could use your iron. I'm not really able to because I use vinyl for that part, but it's okay. So just kind of separate that side seam, roll it in between your fingers. How many times can she say roll it in between your fingers? A lot. I could say it a lot. And we're just gonna clip along as we go. All right. We're almost done. This bag is so cute. I bet yours looks really good too. And I want to see a photo of it. Okay, so now if you wanted to, you could snap it closed just so you can kind of get an idea for what it's going to look like. We've got this really nice large hobo bag that looks really cute. So we'll unsnap it. We're not done yet. We can't admire our work just yet. We're going to lay it down on our machine
If you've got like an extension on your machine, you can move it out if you want. Please disregard how messy it is under my table. You know, it happens. Ugh, that's real messy. Okay, so I'm gonna start at my side seam. I'm gonna get it under my fabric. If you wanted to switch to a regular foot instead of keeping your walking foot on, you can at this point, but I'm just gonna leave it on because I'm lazy. We're gonna start by back stitching a little bit and then just keep going slowly over those side seams. And you're gonna keep it fairly close to the top edge of your bag. Flatten it out as you go. Want to go nice and slow over those side seams. If you can, add a little back stitch through there, because it never hurts to add a little extra. Slowly roll. We're getting close to that other side seam, so what we're going to do is just keep going nice and slow, and then back stitch, go forwards a few times. And she's almost done, you guys. Trim all your extra threads. Oh, how did you get there? All right. So we're just gonna push out those seams again once more. You're gonna match up your snaps, and then you can add on your crossbody strap. Alright, you guys, that's it. You finished it. You nailed it. You did an incredible job. Look at that. It's so pretty. And it's this really nice slouchy bag, so if you're maybe traveling or something, it can fit a lot of stuff in there. And then if you need to pack it up, you know, you can smash it down pretty flat, fold it up, what have you. Alright, you guys, that is it for that video. I hope you enjoyed it. This sewing pattern is my very first sewing pattern from 2 years ago, and I've just been slowly adding to it, learning new things just like you. So this is a sewing pattern that can grow with your skills. And I really hope you guys enjoy it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye.